And then And on top of that, we are also going to be momentarily going to disable the chat. But do not worry, you will be able to write your questions, pose your questions later on in our webinar. It's just to avoid a lot of, stimulation of all the things that's going to be happening now. So we're going to have Camilla, who has been leading this Youth Fusion hotline from 2025 to 2026. We've been doing it for quite a few months. And she led our events team because Youth Fusion had an extended whole team and crew, and she was leading the events team for months in making this happen. So I'm going to give the floor to her in a moment to explain what we've done. And then after that, we're gonna have Ivan talk. He is actually a cornerstone in the hotline because this is actually the second part of, or the second version of the hotline, because Ivan and the previous Youth Fusion team had done a very similar kind of format before. And as the Revive team, we were so inspired by it that we did something similar, but a bit different, maybe a little more to what is happening now. And I'm going to give him the floor as well in a bit to talk about, I guess, the legacy of the first edition in a way. And then we're going to have a bit of a different format. We won't be just doing a panel discussion because I feel like we have a lot of those. Instead, we're going to have a sort of interview segment where we have a couple of questions that we're going to ask the wonderful participants to tell us about what they thought, how they went through this extremely challenging hotline, and how they came out with incredible success. And then there's going to be the opportunity for you to ask questions. You can ask questions individually to the participants, in general, to the different kind of things that we've done and different aspects. And and then we're going to have a little bit of a takeaway from what we've also learned from this. So hope you have a wonderful time, and I will be passing on to Camilla.
Thank you very much, Eileen, for the wonderful introduction. Can you hear me? Did you start the registration, Eileen? Okay, great. Thanks everyone for joining today. We are so pleased to see so much interest in the Youth Hotline campaign. And honestly, we're very surprised, not just because it's a Saturday, but because it is almost provocative to talk about nuclear diplomacy in this moment of profound uncertainty, polarization, and erosion of trust. At Fusion, at first, we felt we were going against the flow by designing and delivering a project aimed to equip the next generation with a practical toolkit for nuclear risk reduction. Yet, it is a key lesson from history that gave us the confidence to move forward. Moments of crisis often create the urgency and the opportunity to agree on arms control and nuclear risk reduction measures. The creation of the 1963 Hotline stands as a striking instance of this. We believe that launching the second edition of the Youth Hotline campaign with a focus on negotiating nuclear risk is not an unrealistic or naive idea. On the contrary, it is a clear declaration that young people refuse to be mere spectators of what is happening. We want to understand, we want to challenge ourselves, and we want to actively engage in nuclear decision making. Now, it's quite a challenge to explain the hotline in such a short amount of time, as for us, it's been almost a 5 months process of work, and for the participants, an intense 3 months commitment, ranging from weekly training and networking sessions to creating content for social media advocacy, passing from a full weekend of simulated negotiations. So maybe the best way to render to you what this hotline meant for both us as organizers and for the participants is to share two unexpected yet very telling outcomes. First, what could have remained an abstract concept, nuclear diplomacy, truly took root in the participants' experience. As they prepared for the simulation game, they internalized two key reminders beyond theoretical notions or best practices. First, nuclear risk is a collective responsibility, requiring shared understanding, intent, and solutions. Second, and perhaps my favorite, try to be the negotiator you wish this world had right now. Guided by these principles, the participants stepped into the role of delegates, defending their assigned national interests while communicating and actively listening to their counterparts to find what the theory calls the ZOPA, the zone of possible agreement. They stayed in character, acted realistically, but challenged themselves, striving to prove a point. The dialogue is not an ideal, but a practical necessity that works, especially when the stakes are high. The second surprising yet defining outcome of the hotline is that despite being online, we were able to create a real space for sharing and learning from each other. With participants coming from different countries and academic backgrounds, we had to navigate diverse levels of access to information and practical engagement. It was incredibly rewarding to see how the conversations on opportunities for youth in the nuclear field became a source of meaningful exposure and inspiration. If, as a side effect, we created a small community of motivated early professionals and advocates, we hope the resource sharing will not vanish with the end of the project. Therefore, in short, with the hotline, we tried to bridge theory with practice, giving a first-hand experience of what it means to work across political divides to prevent a nuclear crisis from escalating. We strived for realism, considering the current nuclear landscape, while at the same time preserving a clear footprint of we tried to be resourceful because gatekeeping youth from nuclear non-proliferation, risk reduction, and disarmament is not just a divestment from the future, but it also deprives us of solutions today. We try to be impactful, and that is why we had the final phase of the project as output driven. We wanted to reach as many youth as possible through our social media channels and let others know that youth fusion can be a reference point for those who want to challenge the underestimation and the normalization of nuclear risk in our lives. And lastly, we tried to be empowering, amplifying youth voices that were looking for a megaphone to do so. But this is not for me alone to validate, and for that, you're about to hear directly from the participants of the second edition of the Youth Online campaign. Thank you.
All right, so moving on, I guess we will be giving the floor. Thank you, Camilla, so much. We'll be giving the floor for Ivan, who has created this legacy for us to move forward. So, Ivan, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen. Thank you so much. I'm really thrilled to be here. I'm really happy to see that the campaign is in its second iteration. It's gotten a second life, it's possible, which I wasn't so sure of when I first came up with this idea, right, about 3 years ago in the aftermath of the war in Ukraine. I'm from Russia. I was living in Russia when the war broke out. So I had a lot of ideas how I can bring the youth in my country, especially in my country, and reignite interest in disarmament at the time when negotiations, diplomacy were not on the table. Um, and having done that or having looked into different opportunities, I realized that, well, just bringing youth from Russia, Ukraine, and the US wouldn't be enough. So there came a that this came a there came an idea to bring the youth from all countries possible, not only Russia, US, also non-nuclear countries, to really look into what peace means for us. And I think the model, or I would guess the pattern that we created with webinars and networking experience is something that Camilla and the team and Eileen really picked up on. And I'm really happy that this year's team has evolved into nuclear risk reduction. The new START treaty expired a few days ago, and we're all reading about the follow-up, what's coming up next. And I think we should really look for new ways for unconventional ways to engage young people in nuclear risk reduction through platforms like this. And I'm happy that the participants here are supporting it, and your presence here is important. And such platforms can really help learn, engage, and just go out in the world and make a real impact. So everything that the participants have done here this year matters so much beyond what we can now comprehend. So the impact will follow, and I applaud the core team for this great effort. I really encourage the participants just to keep in touch, be friends, network, go out in the world, be colleagues, write papers together, and we're all in the same boat, and we really should stick together. So I'll probably end here and um, give it back to Camilla or Eileen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ivan. Truly. I think when I first joined Youth Fusion, I read about the hotline and I was so inspired by it because it is exactly what a network is. I mean, after all, Youth Fusion is a network and you are only as strong as the weakest unit. And we wanted to make sure that we have an incredible network that we build. So thank you so much for inspiring us and showing us what young people can do. And we've taken that with I guess with stride. And without further ado, I'm gonna let Natia, our liaison, pose questions for our incredible participants here. So, Natia, thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Eileen, for the floor, and hello, everybody. And also thanks to Camilla and Ivan for sharing their few words as well. Very excited to be here. And as it was mentioned, to briefly outline the format, this will be a moderated interview style discussion. Each participant will have up to 3 minutes to respond, which will help us ensure that we hear from everybody today. And with that, I'd like to begin with the first question and invite Daisy to the floor. And my question would be, how has your understanding of nuclear risk, peace, and security evolved through your engagement in the project, and particularly after stepping into this role of a negotiator, which was probably the key light, the key highlight, sorry, of this project. So Daisy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nadia. So, before I step into that question, maybe just a background. So, I came from a non-nuclear armed country, and so I think just like many youth in a non-nuclear armed country, nuclear weapons didn't feel like a space where I naturally belong, and so discussions about it often seem distant and expert-driven. So before this program, my understanding of nuclear risk was very broad and mostly associated with major powers and high-level geopolitical tensions. But stepping into the role of a negotiator changed that. So I began to see how nuclear risk is not only about weapons or doctrines, but about decision making under uncertainty. So there were moments when I had to pause because another delegate would suggest something that sounded reasonable, but it was not fully aligned with the position of the country I was representing. So there was some hesitation on my end, and that made me realize how careful states have to be when information is incomplete and when every word can carry meaning. So the simulation also gave me a deeper appreciation of why some states emphasize strategic flexibility and are cautious about constraints. Even when cooperation is valued, there are national responsibilities and security considerations that make agreement complex and time consuming. So that experience helped me understand that peace and security aren't just about agreeing in principle. They involve navigating uncertainty, mistrust, and competing priorities in a very deliberate way. So I think so overall my perspective shifted from seeing nuclear risk as a distant technical issue to recognizing it as a deeply human and relational challenge in which communication, interpretation, and judgment play a huge role in whether tensions are reduced or
Thank you, Daisy. Thank you for your thoughtful reflection on the how you were able to connect this things that we covered in the simulation and how it can be translated into the real world situations, and especially the points about the judgment and communication, which was definitely key throughout the entire project. Thank you very much for that. I'd like to ask another question to Mohammed, and I would like to ask, what did you learn from the training and networking sessions, which were one of the first two phases of the Youth Hotline campaign? And what innovative strategies or negotiation approaches emerged that surprised you in terms of its effectiveness or form, etc.? So yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nadia. So first of all, I learned a lot from this simulation, and this was my first in the context of nuclear risk reduction. And I learned a lot of things. And the most important that I realize, and we practice even in this simulation, that the effective diplomacy in the communication isn't just about to stick radically with the position of your country, and you are not ready to let down, and you are not ready to give up something instead of for the broader interest of the humanity and the every state. So I think we practice this idea in the simulation, and that really worked for me. And the second most important thing, that the negotiation isn't just about the political rhetorics and making big statements that this is your position and you did that in the past. I think you have to more focus on very small details and very specific detail of the negotiations, and that what we discuss reviving of the hotline campaigns, and we see that in the past, in the late 90s during the Cold War, that really worked. And I'm from Pakistan, and Pakistan is a nuclear armed state, and I have the idea of that how it really works in the past during the 2000s when it was standoff with India, and the both country was neck to neck, and I think the hotline campaigns at that time that really pave a way. So this was the second most important thing for me, to let's revive these hotline campaign and let's talk, because in the fog of the miscommunication, we see the most incident happen, and we also see that the many nuclear risks do not basically come from the deliberate attacks, but from the technical error, cyber incident, and the lack of the clarity. So I think these small details are very important in negotiations, and we have to more focus on this. So I learned these kind of thing. And the third most important thing for me was the inclusion of the expert level dialogue, instead of just again the same thing that I mentioned, instead of just politicians and all those that are carrying the weight on their shoulder of the political dialogues, the political statement. When you include the expert of the field, that really work a lot. So I think these three or four things that that really I learned from this dialogue and this simulation, and we practice this in by leading our country, our states in this simulation. So yeah.
Thank you very much for your insight here, especially sharing your country's example and a bit of background and how important it was to really do learn a bit more about how negotiations work and how it can be applied to real life, and how it's not just about the politics and the discussions, but to implement this detail-oriented approach, because it's such a heavy and complex subject. Building on this perspective, I would like to now invite Bartu to the conversation and ask, what lessons did you take away about why negotiations fail, even when all sides recognize this huge risk that is upon us? So the floor is yours.
Hi, Nathia. Firstly, I would like to thank the entire Youth Fusion team, but also for everyone in the webinar today to come and hear about what we've done. Regarding your question, 2 to 3 lessons first come to my mind, drawing on the exercises that we have conducted. The first one is that language matters more than we often want to admit. We saw that vague or flexible language can help achieve early consensus, particularly in a multilateral setting, but that same ambiguity can quickly become a liability. We might use phrases like as appropriate or where feasible, or debate whether a provision calls upon, urges, or decides. And where before stepping into this role, I always thought that on paper these look like little technical or even pedantic differences, in negotiations in practice, they shape how obligations are understood and whether states believe that they are truly voluntary. And over time, it kind of felt like these interpretation gaps can raise questions about intent and trust, and overall can stall implementation, even when everyone agrees on the underlying goal of preventing escalation. The second point that came to my attention during the exercise is that multilateral negotiations amplify the complexity in the ways that bilateral agreements do not. Maybe for a bit of a context, we were all representing different nations in different states in the open-ended working group. And in occasions where we were discussing having voluntary nuclear risk reduction centers or regional dialogue forums, there were, for example, disagreements as to which states qualify for that forum or who should be allowed observer status. And each additional participant introduced a new legal, geographic, and political sensitivities that made alignments far more difficult than I thought it would have been, at least compared to the bilateral risk reduction arrangements that we have in the world. We've seen similar dynamics play out very recently, such as yesterday in Geneva during the conference on disarmaments, when different states had different perception as to who should be engaging in talks for a new nuclear arms control treaty. And maybe the last point is that states can and do approach nuclear risk reduction through multiple lenses, through different national strategies. And that even if we do have um, some measures purely for de-escalation, such as hotlines, some states have mentioned in our exercise that these mechanisms must remain strictly focused on risk reduction and not evolve into tools for any other purposes. This, for me at least, reflected that concerns that states fear that even well-intentioned steps today could weaken a state's strategic position tomorrow, which required very deliberate and very thorough thinking. I think my time is coming to an end, but overall, my main takeaways was that from the Youth Hotline campaign was that it's about the importance of designing measures that acknowledge these realities while still meaningfully reducing the risk of miscalculation. And I think most importantly for me was really being able to create those connections both with the other delegates, not only in a professional setting, but also in a more of a personal setting to be able to collectively drive forward this goal that we have of reducing nuclear risks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barta, for your response, which did capture this key tension that we observed during the simulation as well. And I think what made the entire the very jam-packed 2 days of the simulation weekend for our participants was how carefully they researched their countries, their states, and not just in terms of legal and political stance, but also attitudes to the entire topic and how they really acted as if they were representatives, which, as I mentioned, only made the conversations richer and very, to be honest, fun to observe. And we were very much impressed. But this leads me to another question now, in terms of negotiations and decision making. And now I would like to invite Rebecca to the floor and ask her what if there was a moment in the simulation where you felt the weight of decision making, the sense that a small choice could have had some irreversible consequences. And perhaps you could also tell us about what did that teach you about real world nuclear governance. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that great question, Nadia. First of all, can you hear me all right? Okay, perfect. So yes, I think there were several moments during the simulation in which I think we can all agree that we felt great responsibility behind our decision-making processes. First of all, I think the dot in which we felt the most pressure was from the very beginning. The cybersecurity incident we were dealing with was unclear. We had no idea who had caused it. We had no idea what it could cause in the future. And that very point seemed small at first, but then, we all went through many different mind processes, whether to wait for more information, how seriously to treat this warning, or how strongly to act upon it. This moment could have become a great crisis, and that we had to react to under a lot of pressure and uncertainty. Then I think this sense of responsibility became even more evident when we were drafting the final document. When agreeing on concrete language was one of the most difficult parts of the entire exercise, I believe. I think many will agree with me. Many times we found ourselves stuck over specific words or phrases, even when we broadly agreed on the goals. Different delegations could interpret same terms in different ways, and what sounded acceptable to one party could raise concerns for another. Reaching common wording often required long discussions, repeated revisions, and very, very, very careful compromise. These moments showed us that in nuclear related negotiations, language is never really neutral. How something is written can influence how it is understood, implemented, and trusted. The process also highlighted how disagreements are not necessarily a sign of failure, in my opinion, but a natural part of managing very sensitive issues. Even when tensions rose or talks slowed down, maintaining respectful dialogue was really essential. Small breakthroughs, agreeing on a sentence, softening a formulation, or even acknowledging another delegation's concern, helped build momentum and even trust. Over time, I think these incremental steps made it possible to move forward, even without resolving every underlying difference. Overall, I think the simulation taught us that nuclear governance in the real world is rarely about one dramatic decision, but rather a series of careful and very difficult choices that are made in uncertain conditions. I think it depends on restraint, clear communication, and a willingness to keep talking and keep negotiating, even through misunderstandings. Experiencing how fragile trust can be in this ambience and how much effort it takes to preserve it helped us better understand why patience, empathy, and being precise with our communication is central to preventing escalation and managing nuclear risk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, for your very, very detailed and well-rounded response here. And you clearly shed a light on how the entire campaign and the weekend of negotiations kind of happened, especially with the topic that our participants were dealing with, which, as you mentioned, was very much unclear. But what's really important here is what you've highlighted: the willingness, the patience, despite this lack of trust in the realm of international relations and specifically in terms of nuclear governance. So thank you very much. I would like to move on and ask Kamar another question, which is, after stepping into the world of role of negotiator, how has your understanding of peace and security evolved, and how will that shape your future engagement in the field? And to talk about your personal takeaways from that as well. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Natya and the team. Before answering my question, I will tell a story, a personal story. Last year, I took two courses during my degree at the university. One was on disarmament, the other was on international law. So my teacher, who was taught me the international law, he told me that how the treaties are made and what are the some important treaties in international relations. At that time, negotiating a treaty felt like a very linear process. We felt like it's very easy. Just the leaders around the world go on the table and they made a treaty. That's how treaties are made. But this time, when I myself was a negotiator, I found that it's not a linear process at all. Even a minor details, they do matter. For example, as the Bartu has mentioned, the language of the treaty is very important, and on that basis, one country can take concessions, and on that basis, one country might get back. So very minor details, for example, language does matter a lot. There is another factor, for example, the human psychology. The person who is negotiating a treaty does also matter. The country is representing, the background he has came from, the understanding of the adversary and the image and the perception of international relation of that person does also matter. For me, for the negotiator, a negotiator should also understand its enemy. It should be empathetic towards somehow its enemy. It should not only represent its own national interest. It should, but it should also see the position of its adversary to create consensus, to create mutual grounds to negotiate a treaty. In the future, if I will be given another chance to be a negotiator, I would be much more pragmatic and much more. I will bring the idealism as well into it, but I will follow the pragmatic idealism because I believe that not only the pragmatism and not only the idealism will save us. I think it's the mix of both idealism and the pragmatism that will save this world. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And I agree. It's a great perspective, and it's very important to keep a balance, not in terms of this current specific topic we're talking about today, but just in general as well. But very interesting. Thank you very much, Kamar. Next question that I would like to ask will be more kind of delving into the youth engagement and peace and security and disarmament. And I'd like to invite Valeria to this conversation and ask her what comparative advantages does youth bring, in your opinion, to nuclear risk reduction that traditional policy spaces may lack, perhaps, and also what needs to change for youth engagement to move from this symbolic to a substantive kind of space. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Natia, for the question. One of the main advantages young people bring to nuclear risk reduction is that we look at security in a different way. While young people may have less professional experience, they often bring perspectives and a sort of creativity and willingness to question established approaches. This is because the youth have a whole different perception of the world and of security. For many of us, nuclear risk is not only a strategic issue, but also a social and human one. Nuclear risk translates to living with the possibility of irreversible humanitarian consequences, where entire communities, as in health systems and environmental damages, would be affected for long after any political or any military objective is achieved. Looking at nuclear risk reduction from the outside of traditional policy spaces can help identify problems or opportunities that may sometimes be overlooked by experts who are already working inside these systems. So youth can contribute to the development of innovative and complementary solutions alongside the work of experienced experts. This combination could strengthen how we think about risk reduction and cooperation. Referring to what needs to change for youth engagement to move from symbolic to substantive, is that in many spaces, young voices are underrepresented. And when we are included, our participation often does remain symbolic. There's often not much of a clear link between what young people discuss and the decisions that are actually taken in place. And even though these policies that are made will directly affect our generation in the future. This is important because the young generation is the future generation that will have the consequences from the actions of today. So for youth engagement to become truly meaningful, there needs to be a stronger investment in early career researchers or analysis and more structured opportunities for young people to collaborate directly with senior experts and decision makers. This simulation is like an exemplary way of demonstrating how youth can engage with complex issues, they can negotiate and propose realistic solutions. So what is needed now is to create this channel where initiatives like this can be shared with and considered by professionals working in nuclear policy. So therefore, I thank everyone in the Youth Fusion for letting us get involved and giving us the opportunity to start making a change.
Thank you very much, Valeria, for those very, very powerful words regarding youth engagement in this field. And I myself, as a youth representative, with my colleagues here, Camilla and Aileen, and all the other participants, I feel like all of us should be very much proud of the work that you have done. This is definitely one of the examples and clear and honest examples of how much potential youth has in this and many other fields. And kind of on this topic and bringing in the intergenerational dialogue, I would like to ask Pablo this time, what insights from this project do you believe senior decision makers working in nuclear policy most need to hear right now from us and from you specifically now? So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Perfect. Well, first of all, I would like to use the first few seconds of my intervention to thank the Youth Fusion team for developing and supporting this important initiative, as well as to all the participants in this webinar. And regarding the questions, I actually would like to start from the basics. I would like to substantiate a point that is simple, but yet powerful. And I think that right now, What senior decision makers and experts in nuclear policy most need to hear is that there is a group of around 10 young professionals who have been consistently meeting on weekends to develop practical and creative solutions to some of the most complex challenges in nuclear risk reduction. We have done this balancing our jobs, our studies, our family responsibilities, and also different time zones. And for me, this reflects two essential things: awareness and commitment. Awareness of the gravity of the nuclear threat and commitment to working constructively to reduce it. During the Youth Online campaign, we recognize that dialogue is difficult, especially in issues related to nuclear weapons and national security, where political tensions and strategic competition often dominate. Actually, we have recent examples, such as the expiration of the new START treaty, merely around 48 hours ago, sadly. However, rather than accepting this as an obstacle, we focus on how to make dialogue more resilient, more reliable, and more continuous, even in times of crisis. Our discussions generated ideas that evolve into practical proposals. Among them is the establishment and the strengthening of nuclear risk reduction centers, as well as the development of cyber-resilient and regularly reviewed communication hotlines. These mechanisms acted as tools designed to ensure that communication channels remain open when they are needed the most, reducing misunderstanding, miscalculation, and escalation. We believe that maintaining reliable dialogue is one of the most effective and realistic first steps towards meaningful nuclear risk reduction. And as my colleagues have said before, progress does not always begin with grand political breakthroughs, but actually with ensuring that communication never breaks down. To conclude, throughout with this project, we try to be the kind of leaders that we believe are needed at this precise moment. Pragmatic, for sure, yet cooperative and future-oriented. Our message to senior decision makers is simple. There is a new generation ready to engage seriously, to think creatively, and to contribute responsibly to reducing nuclear risk. We hope that our work, this that we have conducted during the Youth Hotline campaign and the one we will conduct in the following years, will serve both as a contribution, but also as an encouragement to continue strengthening dialogue and building trust.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And I think this should be a very good example for future generations coming, whoever is interested in the nuclear field and disarmament, to really follow the steps, and many others that other young people are following, who are involved in this, and kind of really amplifying this critical and creative thinking in the field. Moving on, I would like to now invite two people for this question, who are going to be Daisy and Mohammed, and ask, during the training, we discussed the underrepresentation of women in negotiations despite statistics highlighting the benefits. And based on the simulation exercise and practices, what role do you think gender inclusion plays in strengthening agreements in nuclear risk reduction? So I think this will be a very nice and broad topic to cover and highlight today. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, reflecting back on the simulation, at first, I thought gender didn't really come up during the simulation, but reflecting on it more, I realized that the fact that it didn't come up is itself an issue. So when gender perspectives are absent without anyone noticing, including me and the other negotiators, it shows how easily certain dimensions of inclusion can be unintentionally left out of the conversation. So as a woman, it took me some time to recognize that gap, which made me more aware of how neutral or technical discussions can still overlook whose experiences and perspectives are being reflected. So in areas like nuclear risk reduction, where discussions often focus on states and strategies, the broader social and human dimensions can quietly fade into the background. I think gender inclusion strengthens agreements because it broadens how risks and priorities are understood. Different perspectives can influence how problems are framed, how communication happens, and what kinds of solutions are considered acceptable or sustainable. Inclusion isn't only about representation, it's about making the process more reflective of the diverse societies that the security policies ultimately affect. So for me, one key lesson is that inclusion requires intention. It doesn't automatically happen, even in well-meaning settings. Recognizing its absence is an important first step toward more comprehensive and balanced approaches to risk reductions. Thank you.
And Natia, for me, that I think from the simulation, I think it's been clear now that the underrepresentation of the women in negotiation, in dialogue, in diplomacy, it's just not the fairness issue, and it's just not the gender equality issue. It's about the, I think, the effective problem and talking about the decision making. Because I'm the personal believer of the gender equality, and what I observe that when you include women in diplomacy in negotiations, I think they have those soft skills. They are a good listener, and if you are sitting in a negotiations table, being a good listener is a very important thing, and I think women are very good in this context. And another very important thing, I think, they came up with the very multifaceted ideas, because personally I observed that the male, they more stressed upon, they more focus on the status quo, they more focus on the strategic advantage, and they more focus on the very classical position of their country. But when women are sitting on the negotiation table, they more focus on the what will be the human consequences if we choose this decision, what will be the crisis management and long-term stability. I think the women inclusion in these kind of negotiation is very important, because they that make those agreements, those discussion more durable, more sustainable, and more long-term impact. So yeah, this is what I really observed from the simulation also. And they came up with the policy oriented that already I talk about the hotline campaign, expert level dialogue. So that's why I think it's very important. And the simulation we participated, it demonstrated that the gender equality isn't just about the equality of sitting women and men, but also about the credibility and durability of the agreement that you are basically discussing upon. So yeah.
Amazing. Thank you very much, both of you. It really does cover, both of you covered a lot of amazing and very insightful points here. I'd like to now direct this next question to Pablo and Kamar and talk about another sort of broad but also highly important topic, which is the regional representation. So participants in the Youth Hotline campaign came from Europe, South America, and South and East Asia, often with different levels of exposure to discussions on nuclear risk and non-proliferation and disarmament. As you might have already noticed, some of them are not only in the field of IR and law, but also have the scientific background. So I would like to ask the two speakers now, how did these varied regional perspectives and information backgrounds shape discussions and negotiations during the simulation? And what did this diversity add to the to working across divides within the Youth Hotline campaign? So Pablo and Kamar, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, I would like to start talking a little bit about the regional perspectives that you mentioned in your question. In my opinion, I believe that the diversity of participants in these projects reflects a growing global understanding of nuclear risk, which I think that this is a very important step forward. Because nuclear weapons are often discussed in strictly national terms. Maybe we talk about the Chinese arsenal, the Russian arsenal, the US arsenal, etc., etc., etc. Sometimes we talk about regions. But I believe that this is not that I believe, this is proven actually, that the consequences of any use of nuclear weapons, whether intentional, accidental, due to malfunction, etc., etc., do not remain confined to national borders. Like there would be regional, potentially global in scale, And in this sense, like global participation reflects this global awareness. And I would like to tie this precisely with the theoretical side through which we have been understanding nuclear weapons, and is that during the Cold War, a new concept arose, which is the concept of MAD, mutual assured destruction, what I think everyone here is very familiar with. And basically, at the origin, like this concept signal like the capacity of retaliation, saying basically that any use of nuclear weapons by state A would result in the complete destruction of the state if state B also deploys its nuclear weapons. Also, already during the Cold War, but especially now with the arsenals and the technology that we have, this mutual destruction is not only confined to state A or to state B, it's like it can completely shape the understanding of humanity that we had, or the future of humanity that we want to have. So I think that global participation is an increasing awareness in this regard. And I think that it's precisely what we need to shape nuclear risk reduction right now.
Thank you so much. So, for me, diversity really reflects the worldview of the different participants who participated during the simulation. As the Ivan has mentioned, that bringing different voices is important because we know that there is a clear division between different regional realities exist. On the one side, there are countries, for example, South America, we can say the non-nuclear weapon states, uh, where the youth are the people living in those states. They are more lenient towards humanitarian issue, towards more morality of the issue. But the people who have the different regional realities, for example, participants coming from South Asia, for example, participants coming from Europe, they see nuclear weapons from a different lens. They are somehow more nuclear optimist. So I believe that we need to reduce that division that exists between two different regional realities by bringing different people from different backgrounds. Because when we tell the story, when we tell that how we believe how nuclear weapons should be placed, how what the role they should be played, then we actually listen their perspective, and then we may amend our own vision of the word. And also there is an other issue of culture. I remember when we had the first session, Muhammad Awais asked a question that in Europe, nuclear activism is easy because you can reach out to any maker if he is going down the road, and you can tell them that this issue is important and have a proposal to the solution. But in countries like Pakistan, in India, it is not that easy. To meet the policymaker is a very hard challenge. So youth living in Pakistan, in India, and the other countries that share the same culture, it is very hard for them to be more nuclear activists. I believe that the search platforms can serve a very good platform for them to share their voices and concerns as well. Uh, and also diversity is important in terms of age brackets. For example, the people who, for example, some of the boomers who are present in this session, they know, they have listened personally the stories of the 1945, the unthinkable what had happened. But now the youth of this age, they haven't directly experienced nuclear catastrophe, so they are less aware somehow. But I believe that from this platform, I really request all of those policymakers and all those people that not you should not just provide the space to the youth to come up to talk on this issue, but you should train these peoples, because these people are going to run the world after you. Because these are the people, and if they don't know what the nuclear weapons are, if they don't know what had happened in 1945, they might do something that may never happen. So I think that the diversity from different perspectives should be seen, and it should be encouraged, so that the more people from different backgrounds, from different age brackets, from different cultural cultures can come up and share their own grievances and share their own vices. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kamar. Thank you for the whole interview segment. I hope that everyone who joined in really got to see how incredible our participants are, their how incredible their thoughts have been through this. Some of The things that they've been saying were um, things we intended them to conclude with, things that they take away from this experience of the hotline. And then they also surprised us with incredible new revelations that we didn't even think of. So I really want to thank all of these participants and congratulate you for such a successful simulation and engagement. Um, Speaking of the takeaways that we want to give as Youth Fusion is something that Kamara just mentioned as well is different age brackets. Now, when it comes to youth, there is this weird paradox that we find ourselves in. On the one hand, when it comes to negotiating right now in real time, we're not considered experienced enough. On the other hand, in all the rhetorical speeches, it's always mentioned how the youth is the future and ideologically how we are the next generation to save the world. And we want to showcase that we want to demystify that and say, well, yes, we are the future. We are also here in the present. And we are also, when we put in training, for example, the incredible participants had several webinar sessions where they learned about nuclear disarmament, nuclear security. Camilla did an incredible job teaching them with different PowerPoints, posing questions, educating people who are not necessarily in the field, have never had classes in international relations or in nuclear security. And this goes to show that the testimonies that you just heard that when you frame it with education, that participants can and youth can do a lot, not only in the eventual future when we are future leaders, but right now. And a key element of this, especially as some of the participants mentioned, with the expiration of the START Treaty, with things in the nuclear world looking rather scary, these kind of hotlines, these kind of simulations are an opportunity to find alternatives and new ways of engaging with the solution for these difficult, complicated situations. So one of the key things that we wanted to do from the beginning is we have different kinds of participants coming from different nationalities. Some nuclear states, some non-nuclear state holding countries. And we intentionally put our participants in a different role. So, for example, we had a Pakistani national who played America. We had a European national playing North Korea. So we wanted to showcase the constraints that to bring you out of your own national perspective and put you into the constraints of a different nation. And in that way, which kind of might sound like a double constraint, you guys actually found commonalities and ways to still engage, still communicate, still negotiate. And that is kind of what we hope for the future and something that other negotiations take on as well, to not just put yourself into the silos of your own country and nationalism, but also find ways to come to the table despite or because of them. And that was something that we saw how the participants really mastered with such creativity in their working paper as well as in the questions they posed to each other and the way they spoke with a lot of respect to also the others. And our ambition is also just that there's this sort of thoughtful integration into existing policy ecosystems of something like this, of going past constraints, going past such hurdles, and maybe finding solutions to this pretty dangerous world with nuclear weapons. So what it also is just basically ultimately that the future is really strengthened by decision making that has sustained investment in realistic preparations. And we hope that we gave our participants exactly that, that you had a realistic like understanding of what is happening right now, the scary parts of cybersecurity even, but also finding ways to engage with it in a different way. And but still approaching it with extreme seriousness. I mean, if you, I don't know if we're going to be sharing the documents that these wonderful participants wrote, it's very serious. It is UN language and extremely well formulated. They also wrote an article together talking about their experiences from this, and we also had them do little social media explanations of certain questions as well, different ones than the ones that they answered. So please do check them out. And now I would like to give all of those who are viewing the floor and give you the opportunity to ask questions today. So if you have a question, please do write them in the chat, put your hand up, maybe if that's possible, and pose the question. If you have a specific question to a specific participant, feel free to call them out. And yeah, shall we start? Natia, would you like to help me with this? And
Thank
Camilla?
you, Eileen. I already opened the chat. Thank you for your words. And yes, we kept this format so that it's easier also to interact just by switching on the microphone. So I can see already a hand. So Aline, you want to jump in?
Thank you very much, Kamala and Aileen, and commendations to all the participants in this. Really important that you're engaged very much in what are these dynamics in the negotiations, which also relate to, of course, what the political situation. It's very difficult, and a commendation that rather than just sitting back and saying, "Hey, it's hopeless," this, like bilateral agreement, between Russia and the United States, things are not working very well in the NPT. You've actually come in and said, "Look, how can we resolve this? What are some ideas?" It's really, really important. So my question is, with some of the experience, and the thinking that you've had in this, are you able to take this into some of the forums where there are policymakers who might learn from this? For example, at the NPT Review Conference, are you able to participate there? With the OSCE, Organization for Security Cooperation in Europe, is there like an opening where you're able to engage with them and get some of these things into that? The UN General Assembly, what are the opportunities that you're looking at? And are there areas where some of us might be able to assist in getting that access? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Aline, for your question. As the project is wrapping up, we are trying to we're looking for avenues where this project can actually be narrated and be explained, because we think that, as it's been said during the conversation earlier, there is something that we also can teach to senior levels from our perspective, our also inexperience, and maybe different perspectives. So for sure, we are looking for avenues where we can bring the fruits, but also the logic and underneath the project, and share it with others. So it's something we will share as soon as we have more certainties, but it's something we've been working on. And also I want to say that the participants' enthusiasm is also very encouraging, because it means that they will continue to collaborate with us if the occasion comes and there is an opportunity to speak again. So thank you for your question, Aline. I see a question in the chat from Regina again. How did the Hotline participants find each other? So we opened an application in September. We were looking for 18 people, and actually at the beginning we were more. There were more participants, but then because of life happening and different scheduling and priorities, we only 10 participants effectively completed the whole project, which was meant to be in 4 phases. So out of fairness, some participants did share some moments with us, but did not complete all the phases. And for sure, when we're going to launch a 3rd edition, we will open another call for applications. And that's how we met each other. And I also see a comment from Jane Fan. Absolutely. Like we tried, Eileen, Nat, and I brainstormed a lot before, relaunching this edition, and we tried to do something that younger us would have loved to apply for. So we really tried to give an educational opportunity, but there was also a networking opportunity, and to really open a tiny bit of the nuclear field world to those who were not exposed before. So we tried to do something in our little, and I hope we managed. Are there any other comments, or someone
I
wants to?
see that Dr. Seto has her hands up, so please feel free to pose your question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, before posing my two questions, I would like to congratulate you. It has been very stimulating for me to listen to you. Very necessary to have with us, and I see that you are going beyond activism, which is very important, and this diversity, this geopolitical and language and gender diversity is essential. But although, as you have noticed, establishing a meaningful dialogue is not easy under such circumstances. My two questions, well, I have to say, maybe you are aware of the work that we are doing in the UN panel, independent scientific panel on effects of nuclear war, no? And my two questions are related to the work of this panel. One of them is we are mandated to organize consultations with NGOs. And my question would be if you are prepared to take part in one such consultation sometime during this year. And my second question is, in the longer term, we have to deliver our final report to the UN General Assembly in the fall of 2027. And we're working very hard on it. You can be sure that our panel members are very, very committed to the task. And my question would be, how could you help disseminate the findings of our report? Because it is true that part of the younger generation is aware of I prefer to say of the dangers, nuclear dangers rather than risks, no? But many young people are well, especially in the nuclear weapon-free zones, no, in the non-nuclear weapon states. This is a subject that is somehow very distant from us, no? So those would be my two questions.
Thank you so much. We as Youth Fusion would be delighted to partake in any sort of consultory meetings. We're happy to convey what we think, what our generation thinks. I think for example, one of the advice that I gave some of our participants here was answer honestly, even if for you that question or the response might seem obvious because it is an obvious response for our generation or for our youth group. Just answer with that because that is something maybe different and nuanced. So we are more than happy to help in any sort of way. And regarding the dissemination of the UN report and about people and in countries where it feels distant to engage with the nuclear danger. One of the things, this is something that we as a core team have been discussing, and one of the main ways as a younger generation we have found the solution to, which again might seem obvious, is social media. Like we have intended on, because the internet is such an incredible way to find people in completely different nooks and crannies. We've been able to educate a little bit, inform about what goes on in a way that doesn't scare people off. I think when we read any newspaper or open any sort of news site, it is so daunting and overwhelming what is happening with politics that I think a lot of us shut down. And we shut down to the point where we can't even think about what a solution would be to a nuclear danger because there's so much happening. So, in a calm, engaging way is, I think, or we think, the way to go forward. I hope that helps. Camilla, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to jump in and say that it's very easy to explain something peer to peer. It's something we've been taught also in school. If you don't understand math, just ask first, a classmate of yours. Try to see if with his language, which is familiar to you, then you can understand something that you cannot really figure out by yourself. So maybe that's also a strength that you can bring to the conversation, because we can translate our language with our sensitivity, something that might feel distant otherwise. So thank you for the offer, Dr. Seto. We will be very pleased to do so, to engage with you. Jackie, you have a question or a comment?
Yes. First of all, I just want to congratulate you for a tremendous effort. I'm very impressed with all of the participants. You're all very articulate, and I heard a lot of knowledge and compassion, but I also think I heard some real passion and commitment to the issue, and maybe now that you have a deeper understanding of why it's so important. So my question is to the participants, where do you see yourself taking this knowledge and experience and commitment now? Where do you see, how do you see yourself going forward working on this issue, both personally and professionally?
Courageous one who wants to jump in, guys? Bartu, okay. Thank
Maybe
you.
I can start and then others can
Yeah, you
add
can talk.
on. Maybe just for a little bit of a background, I come from a technical background, so I don't have any international relations experience study-wise. I did my bachelor's degree in neuroscience, and now I'm doing my master's degree in biotechnology. And then I really got interested in anything and everything regarding weapons of mass destruction. So I started my path from the biological side, but then got interested in the nuclear side. So going forward, my aim right now as an early career individual is to try to be the synthesizer of different groups, between whether it's the technical side and the political side, or between the bio world and the nuclear world. And for me, that was one of my main takeaways. By doing this simulation, I got to observe and understand the negotiation world a little bit better. And again, going forward, I hope to bring that knowledge to whatever area that I'm in, and really be able to bring together all different pieces of information, different people, different groups together to, again, advance our common goal. That's at least my aim, but I'm also very curious to hear about other people's perspective.
Thank you, Bartu. Pablo, you want to say something?
Yes, and it's actually really interesting that Bartu spoke before, because in my case, I'm from Spain, and I come completely from the other background. I studied my bachelor in history and politics, so I really like to look at the past to understand the present. And then I did my master's on security studies, along with strategic studies, etc. So following also very much the line of what Bartu said, synthesizing, being like a bridge, between different disciplines that we can really inform the present with them. I feel like there is a necessity to understand what is happening now, to put this into not only a global context, but a historical context, saying, hey, let's look at what happened before, and let's look at what happened before, not only in what we all know so far, which is, 1945, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Let's look what happened in South America with the Tlatelolco Treaty. Let's look what happened in Africa with the Pelindaba Treaty and the South Africa dismantlement of nuclear weapons. Let's see what has happened in the Indo-Pacific, etc. So I would be like more on a personal capacity, let's say, bridging this present and past, but transcending this maybe Eurocentric and approach. And yes, bringing this more on the professional side, bringing this expertise not only in the analytical way, but also on the pragmatic way, on the more policy making oriented way. It's really interested in international organizations and places where multilateral nuclear diplomacy takes place. So bringing past and present together to really shape a better future.
Thank you, Pablo. Kamar, Mohammad, you can talk. I will just invite you to be like under 1 minute if possible. So you can wrap up then.
Okay, thank you so much. So I'm from Pakistan and I'm doing international relations. And most of the think tanks that are working in Pakistan, uh, the nuclear policy is really in the hands of state officials. Am I audible? Okay, so yep. Okay, so most of the people who talk about nuclear are either from the military or those people who subscribe with the military lens of seeing nuclear weapons. This learning that I have taken from it, personally, I would like to point with through my writings, through my engagement with any institutions, that not only the military thinking and not only the state policy is the only option. There are other options. There are other spaces that we can explore. And if disarmament is not a pragmatic solution, and if other options are not pragmatic, there is a little space. For example, we can go more towards the nuclear risk reduction. At least that we can do. So we can be at the time more pragmatic, and at the time we can also come up with more options that our state can follow if it does not want to compromise on its own national security and its own sovereignty. Thank you.
Thank you, Kamar. Muhammad?
Yes, the answer to your question, Anna, I think this really gonna help us professionally in the future because whatever we are learning, I'm basically a student of international politics, and with that, I'm practicing journalism. And yesterday, I see a news that the Trump want to negotiate with China and Russia about nuclear. We see Iran always remain in highlights in news due to nuclear. So I think the topic is very in limelight and topic is very important to discuss. And even in the future, in the coming decades, it will be very important. And the last week, I was at the Catholic Paris University and was in the crisis MUN. And the same thing was that there was a crisis situation and we have to negotiate about it. And the whatever I learned from the Simulation Youth Hotline campaign from the last previous weeks, I really practically subjected to there. So I think this really gonna help us, and not just in the professionally and practical way, but also like for me in journalism, we have to analyze and discuss this topic day by day. So for me, it's really helpful, not just professionally, but also academically.
Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone that contributed. Pablo, I think we don't really have time for another addition, but the content creation of the Youth Hotline team is not finished, so stay tuned because actually some final outputs still have to be published on the Youth Fusion website. And if there are no more comments or questions, I would leave the floor to Eileen or Natia for one last insightful stage,
yeah.
and then we will close.
Definitely. So moving on, and it's amazing. I think that that question is also a really great path towards the ending to our webinar, which is what you guys are going to do next with what you've learned. This is what Youth Fusion is doing next. So as Alan briefly mentioned, the NPT is coming up, the Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference, which is really critical because it is the 2026 one is really important. The previous one, so 2024 and 5 were preparatory ones. So it's the big one coming up. And Youth Fusion will be going to the NPT in UN New York. Hope to see some faces there as well, such as Dr. Seto maybe. And what we're going to be bringing is actually the research team of Youth Fusion. And you guys are, if you want to be part of it, please feel free to contact us about it. So what we're going to be doing is we're doing a polling. So we want to bring quantitative data and also just the opinions of us, our younger generation, to the NPT and actually bring to the decision makers there what the youth things. So therefore, we've created a survey to begin off with. Feel free to share that with your friends, with your colleagues in any sort of capacity. It does not only have to be young people, it can be also for people from other age groups for us to understand and compare maybe how views differ when it comes to this critical time and nuclear weapons. So we will be going through it, seeing what you guys really think, and hopefully bringing it also in what we share in the MPT. Um, that is all from my side. Thank you so much, and I'll be passing on to Camilla.
Thank you. I want to thank my colleagues, Natia and Eileen, for the incredible cooperation. And I also want to thank all the participants. I don't want to get emotional, but I'm going to miss our Saturdays. Knowing you both as early professionals and as people has been a very enriching opportunity of growth for all of us. And I want to thank everyone that made time for joining today. We invited a lot of people and professionals we are looking up to. So your presence today here is really adding value to the discussions we're trying to carry on and the work we've been doing at Fusion. So thank you, and wish you a great rest of the weekend. Thank you. Bye, everyone.